I can still remember seeing the trailer for Cyberpunk 2077 and getting hyped for a fantastic and creative new RPG by CD Projekt Red. And after the disappointing decision by Square Enix to shelve the Deus Ex series, I was looking forward to Cyberpunk 2077 to scratch that futuristic neo-noir itch that Adam Jensen left behind. I would have loved to have been able to play around this fantasy world of tranks, lobos, and zipheads that looks like an homage to many cyberpunk films like Blade Runner, Johnny Mnemonic, Demolition Man, even The Fifth Element, and a bunch of others. But sadly, the bugs and glitches, and ultimately crashes, shows that CD Projekt Red was just not ready for this game to be released yet. Whether you're on console or PC, you will have to deal with these issues at one point or another. For me, my Windows 7 PC had more issues than usual. I'm running a 4th gen i5 with a GTX 980 Ti and 16GB of RAM. But unfortunately, no matter what I did, I couldn't get the game to even launch without crashing. I then noticed that there was a driver update for the graphics card, and I was finally able to get the game to launch. But then, that revealed a whole bunch of new issues within the game's settings, like resolution and aspect ratios. Even then, I was only able to get past the create a character screen, because seconds after loading into the game, it crashes to the desktop yet again. So I did a new reinstall, and this is when I had to lower my desktop resolution to 720p, considering the game only has that option for my monitor. It's an old HD TV that maxes out at 1080i, so it's either that or buy a new monitor, and I can wait. Otherwise, if I ran the desktop at a full 1080 resolution, the game will run in a small window. There is no option for full screen for some reason. Just bordered window or borderless window. I'm not sure, is it an operating system issue? I'm not sure if Windows 10 users have the same issues. But in any case, I lowered all of my settings as low as possible, and I finally got the game to run. And it runs well for what it is. And surprisingly, I was able to eventually max out the graphics settings, minus the ray tracing of course. It actually looks and plays better than consoles, though sometimes the self-shadowing has this grainy texture which may have been intentional. I'm not sure. Although the GTX 980 Ti is a beast of a card, it is definitely showing its age on most games. My PC gets pretty loud playing any big budget game from the past 2 years, and some of the driving and action scenes in Cyberpunk has a lot of frame rate hitching, though that may have been because I was recording the footage with OBS on the same PC. But believe me, it looks much better than this video, and even at 720p, especially on my monitor that is designed for 720p. And if my monitor had a higher resolution, I wouldn't doubt I could crank the game up to 1080p with the same performance. Those with similar or better graphics cards should not have a problem running this game at 1080p with all settings maxed out, again minus the ray tracing if your card doesn't support it. Everything still looks very crisp, and it's not blurry like a PS4 or an Xbox that upscales from a lower resolution to a high resolution. But everything else is fine aside from a few funny glitches, like characters going through walls or an elevator door. Audio is about as good as any other game, and you can hear every detail if you're using surround sound. And judging by the Digital Foundry and GameRanks reviews, even on older PCs, it can still play and look better than a base PS4 or Xbox One. I noticed that the problem was the initial load up. It will just crash right away. You kind of have to coax the game into playing, gently starting the game at the lowest settings, and after the first save point, start to raise the settings one by one, slowly checking back and forth from the settings menu back into the game, to see how the graphics change. Eventually I was able to get it all the way up to max graphics, and I was wondering why couldn't I play the game initially with max settings. It was something about how the game starts, but after the save point I was able to get back into the game starting with max settings. I didn't have to do this every time I reloaded the game. After that save point, it just worked. Also, I put it on slow hard drive in the settings, but this did not affect the load times much. Most of the time, the game loads about as well as you would expect. It's not SSD speeds, which I recommend if you can afford it, but it's still pretty good. Sometimes the loading would take a little while, but other times when you replay the same section, the loading happened in under 10 seconds. I capped the frame rate at 30 frames per second, with VSync at 60, since a 60 frames per second cap had subtle fluctuations here and there, but under intense action scenes, the frame rate can still dip and lag even if you're at 30 frames per second cap. The 720p resolution might not sit well with most people, but it is an old system and an old monitor, and I'm okay with that for now. So for a few days, I wasn't even able to play this game on PC, but I also hear that base PS4s and Xbox Ones are also having issues with bugs and crashes, and frame rate issues. If you don't have the next gen consoles, you may be out of luck as well. I feel that this game may not have been ready for prime time, and should have been delayed another year, even as difficult as that would be to wait for. Perhaps then, all of the bugs and compatibility issues people have been experiencing could have been ironed out, because no matter if you have the PC version or the console versions, you are going to experience some issues within the game. Even going back into the main menu crashes to desktop sometimes, which is strange since it can obviously run well on older PC builds once it gets going. And CD Projekt's last game, The Witcher 3, ran flawlessly and in full screen. Cyberpunk 2077 looks like a fun ride and a welcome treat to end the year with, but as it is now, it's not perfect. There are still the threats of crashing to desktop and a bunch of finagling with your game settings and operating system settings just to get the game to run. Even simple things like a full screen option. But if you're able to resist the temptation of new game hype, I think it's best to wait until they iron out the bugs and crashes. At least by then, the game will be cheaper and might have some extra DLC to enjoy too. If you're able to play it without much issues, congrats. Some people weren't so lucky. This isn't really a review that needs a number, since I believe the game will get better optimized as patches come along. As of this video, my gameplay is from version 1.03, and I believe 1.04 just released, at least on consoles. That helps with the frame rate issues a bit, so it's getting there. Although, if you have a beefy graphics card and a processor, I doubt you'll experience much, if any, frame rate issues. In any case, I'm not a fan of waiting for patches. I think the game should only be released when it's fully baked, but that's just me. So let me know what you're playing Cyberpunk on. Are you on the PC or are you on the consoles? I'm really interested to hear what your experience with the game has been, especially if you have an older PC build. Till next time.